Egypt, year 1520 before Christ. In those dark days, the Hebrew people endured a suffering that seemed to have no end. The Egyptian Empire crushed their bodies with slave labor to break their hope as well. But the more the cruel Pharaoh tightened his grip, the more he revealed his own fear. The Hebrews were multiplying. The king then decreed, "Every newborn Hebrew boy will be thrown into the Nile River. Only the girls will live." He wanted absolute control over them. In Goshen, pure terror took over the dirt streets. Soldiers violently invaded homes, searching for newborns. A desperate mother rocked her small baby in absolute silence, praying with tears in her eyes so God wouldn't abandon them. She instructed her daughter, Miriam, "If you hear the sound of swords, do not run, just hide. But a mother's love is invincible." She made a decision of extreme faith. She would never surrender her beloved son to die at the hands of the cruel Egyptians. The mother wove a reed basket with her own hands, coated it with pitch so it wouldn't sink, and carefully placed her baby boy inside. With a broken heart, but guided by a heavenly force, she walked down to the banks of the great Nile River. Leaving the basket in the gentle waters, she asked Miriam to follow from afar, being her eyes. That fragile little reed boat was not adrift. It was perfectly guided by the invisible hands of the Almighty directly towards the royal palace. Pharaoh's daughter went down to bathe in the river and found the basket. Opening it, she saw the crying boy. With her heart touched by deep compassion, she decided to defy her own father's death decree. "This boy will live," she sentenced. Immediately, young Miriam came out of hiding and offered a Hebrew nurse to care for the child. The princess accepted the offer, and the boy was safely returned to the loving arms of his own true mother, to be breastfed and deeply protected. Time passed very quickly. The boy grew up and was permanently taken to the palace, receiving the name Moses because he was drawn out of the water. He was shaped between two completely different worlds. He grew up as a true prince of Egypt, learning the language of power, the firm posture of command, and how to walk without any fear inside the heart of the empire. He was trained for war and taught that a royal prince must never bow down or show any kind of weakness to anyone. Moses had absolutely everything the wealthiest empire in the world could offer: a powerful name, fine clothes, elite military training, and the respect of all. However, there was another side calling to him in silence, even when no one said a word. The presence of the enslaved Hebrews so close by made something mysterious awaken inside him. He dreamed of simple houses and heard a distant voice. Egypt tried to harden his heart, but he deeply felt the pain of his own people. Feeling a deep restlessness he couldn't explain, Moses decided to see with his own eyes what held up the great palace walls. He marched to Egypt's construction sites, where the Hebrews worked under a scorching sun. There, he witnessed raw brutality. Guards whipped the slaves without any mercy, demanding that they work much faster. The false order of the empire was maintained entirely with blood, and that terrible reality completely tore the heart of the young Egyptian prince. Divine indignation took over his soul. Seeing an Egyptian taskmaster violently beating a Hebrew slave, Moses could not just stand by and watch. He intervened with force to stop the whip, and in the brutal clash, ended up killing the Egyptian to protect his blood brother. In that exact moment, a door was opened that could never be closed again. A Hebrew warned him to flee, saying that his royal title as a prince of Egypt would not save him from that terrible death sentence. The secret quickly spread like wildfire. Pharaoh discovered the betrayal and ordered Moses' immediate arrest. The man who once walked like royalty now had to run desperately to save his own life. The palace saw him as an unforgivable traitor, and the Hebrews looked at him with deep distrust. Moses realized he did not belong to either of those two worlds. He abandoned his crown, his illusory power, and fled into the vast and silent desert, leaving absolutely everything behind. In the unforgiving desert, everything the palace had put on him began to fall away. The majestic name, the prince's posture, and the illusion of control completely disappeared in the scorching heat. All that remained was a wounded, thirsty man carrying the immense weight of guilt. But it was exactly there, in the dry land of Midian, that true life began to sprout. Next to a water well, Moses found shepherds oppressing helpless women, and his unshakable sense of justice spoke up. Moses bravely defended Jethro's daughters by the well, showing that even in the desert, he could not stand injustice. The young women told their father about the Egyptian stranger who saved them. Jethro, a wise man from Midian, called him to eat. There, Moses confessed his true identity, a fugitive from Egypt with blood-stained hands. But instead of cruel judgment, he found an unexpected welcome. The lonely prince who lost absolutely everything was starting to gain a family. Time passed slowly, and Moses had to unlearn the old customs of the palace. In the vast desert, no one cared about his noble titles or his glorious past. To survive, he had to learn to listen to the wind, the dark night, and his own healed heart. He built a simple new routine, a very welcoming new home. Zipporah, his new wife, did not treat him like a distant legend, but like a real and fragile man. And soon, his first beloved son, Gershom, was born into this new desert life. Moses named his son Gershom, saying he was a mere stranger living in a foreign land. Now, he finally had something very precious to lose. However, no matter how far he walked through the sands, the dark Egypt was still very alive inside him. He tried to completely silence his deep guilt with the routine of shepherding, family life, and the silence of the high mountains. But he kept hearing the painful cries of his enslaved people, constantly echoing in his restless and heavy mind. Zipporah said he was not buried in the desert, but merely hidden. The call of the God of his fathers, who had reached him once, would know exactly where to find him. And it was in the middle of an absolutely ordinary day, tending his father-in-law's sheep near the sacred mountain, that the impossible suddenly manifested right before his mortal eyes. Moses saw a bush burning with vivid flames. The fire burned intensely, but the small desert tree was not consumed by the great heat. Amazed by that supernatural scene that defied human logic, he decided to get closer to try to understand that great mystery. Suddenly, a powerful and thunderous voice called his name from the middle of the sacred flames. "Moses, Moses." The voice ordered him not to come any closer and to immediately take the sandals off his tired feet, because that dusty and rocky ground where he was standing had now become a completely holy and majestic land by the presence of the Lord Almighty. The sovereign voice revealed its eternal identity. "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." The Almighty declared that he had seen the harsh affliction of his people in Egypt, heard their desperate cry, and known their terrible suffering. Therefore, he had come down majestically to free them from their heavy chains. Then the divine sentence was given to Moses. "Now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to free my captive people today." Moses recoiled in terror at the weight of that heavenly calling. He questioned, "Who am I? I am just a fugitive man. I am absolutely nobody important." But God guaranteed his sweet presence. The shepherd then asked what he would say if the Hebrews questioned the name of who had sent him. And from the midst of the fire that would not go out, the divine answer echoed for all eternity, "I am who I am. Tell them that the great I am has sent you for their final and glorious liberation." The former prince's mind still fought desperately against the mission. He feared that his people would not believe his word. To prove his great and limitless power, God asked what Moses held in his hands. It was just a piece of wood, an ordinary shepherd's staff. The Lord ordered him to throw it on the dusty ground. The exact moment the wood touched the earth, it transformed into a live and threatening serpent, causing the frightened Moses to flee in pure and absolute terror. The voice of the Almighty echoed once again, demanding an immense act of faith. Stretch out your hand and take the serpent by the tail. Even terrified, Moses blindly obeyed the dangerous divine order. As soon as his fingers tightly closed on the tail of the deadly snake, it instantly transformed back into the wooden staff. The Creator also performed a second miraculous sign, covering Moses' hand with leprosy and immediately restoring it to deeply show his absolute divine authority. Despite the grandiose signs, Moses tried one last desperate excuse. "Lord, I do not know how to speak well. I freeze, my tongue is heavy and very slow." But the Creator replied with great authority, "Who made man's mouth? Now go, I will be with your mouth." When Moses begged God to send someone else instead, the Lord guaranteed that Aaron would speak for him. However, the courageous mission to stretch out his hand and directly confront the arrogant king of Egypt belonged only to Moses. Moses returned to Midian. His wife Zipporah noticed the change. "You saw something." Moses replied, deeply transformed, "I did not see, I heard. The God of Israel commanded me to return." Wise Jethro blessed his departure, saying to go in peace, for the call of the Eternal never leaves a man at peace. Zipporah asked if he would abandon them. Moses didn't know exactly what his return would be like, but he had the absolute and unshakable certainty that he could no longer run away. In the vast desert, Moses met his brother Aaron, guided by God himself. Aaron confessed he heard an inner voice calling him. He warned his brother, "God will break the empire of Egypt, and we will be right in the middle of it." Moses replied with great firmness, "We will be on the right side." He raised his staff and declared that that piece of wood was no longer wood, but a divine and terrible sentence against the relentless and cruel pride of the great king of ancient Egypt. Moses and Aaron entered the grand throne room. Moses did not bow, maintaining the posture of one who carries the authority of heaven. "Majesty, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go so they may hold a feast to me in the desert." Pharaoh laughed with absolute contempt at that absurd demand. "Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice? I do not know this God, and I will certainly not let Israel go." The clash of power between heaven and the earthly throne had begun. Moses insisted, warning that the God of the Hebrews had found them. The king of Egypt became furious, accusing them of disrupting the slaves' work with false ideas of rebellion. To Pharaoh, mercy was a sign of pure weakness, and he claimed to be order itself. Immediately, he decreed a terrible and inhumane punishment. The taskmaster should no longer provide straw for the Hebrews to make bricks, but the daily production quota would magically remain exactly the same as it was before. "Get out of my presence!" shouted the arrogant king, expelling Moses and Aaron from his majestic palace, "and do not come back into this hall pronouncing that sacred name." In the dusty quarries, terror quickly multiplied. Without the straw provided by the overseers, it was humanly impossible to reach the brutal production quota demanded. The heavy Egyptian whips cracked endlessly on the backs of the exhausted slaves. "There is no time! Faster!" shouted the merciless guards with hate. The Hebrew people were completely broken. Some slave leaders confronted Moses and Aaron with deep and cruel bitterness. "You did this. Now the work is absolutely impossible. You brought Pharaoh's fury upon us. You brought God." Moses tried to calm them, but the despair of centuries of pain spoke louder. God does not feel the whip on his back. We do. The liberator deeply felt the crushing weight of pure doubt, trying to destroy and completely paralyze his newly born divine faith. Heartbroken by the redoubled suffering of his people, Moses cried out to the Almighty amidst the shadows of that night, "Lord, why did you allow this? I came to speak in your great name, and they suffered even more." The Creator's answer was immediate and full of majestic authority. Now you will see exactly what I will do. Pharaoh will let them go, not by kindness, but by ultimate force. The Lord was preparing the dark stage for the greatest of all judgments on this fallen earth. Moses knew that the battle the next day would be even more fierce and relentless. Tomorrow we will go again. His heart will just harden, he said to his brother. Aaron, with his face marked by the certainty that God would act, replied with great confidence, "Then the entire empire of Egypt will learn." And so God himself began to answer in the only way a dominating and cruel empire can understand, with terrifying signs that tear down its false and arrogant sense of security. Moses and Aaron bravely returned to Pharaoh's court. The Egyptian monarch, confident in his illusory power, demanded a miracle to prove the authority of the invisible God. Aaron threw the staff on the floor of the luxurious palace, which instantly transformed into a live serpent. But Egypt refused to yield. The heavenly judgment had just begun. By divine order, Aaron touched the waters of the majestic Nile River, and they completely turned into impure blood, rotting the whole empire. The Nile, the main artery of Egyptian life and worship, turned into pure poison. The fish quickly died, and a terrible smell of death spread rapidly. "It's poison!" shouted the terrified citizens in deep despair. Pharaoh, bothered by the plague devastating the empire, called Moses and promised to free the people if the Lord removed the harsh punishment. Moses asked when the king wanted the evil to end. Pharaoh replied, "Tomorrow." Moses declared, "So you will know there is only one God." But Pharaoh lied and hardened his heart again. Then by the Lord's order, Aaron struck the dust of the earth with his staff, and the dust of all Egypt turned into gnats that attacked men and animals. The palace magicians themselves, defeated and trembling with fear, confessed to the king, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh furiously shouted for them to leave. The next day, Moses warned that the Lord would separate the land of Goshen so the king would see the difference. Dense swarms of flies invaded the palace and ruined the land of Egypt. But in Goshen, where the Hebrews lived, the air remained clean and pure. Egypt was beginning to learn the terrible price of losing absolute control over everything. The wind in Goshen was very light, as if an invisible and divine line had been drawn in the air by the Creator himself. "He set us apart," whispered the amazed slaves. The king summoned Moses, ordering them to sacrifice right there in Egypt. Moses firmly refused the false offer of the empire. "It is not fitting. We will sacrifice in the desert, a 3-day journey, as the Lord commanded us." Pharaoh yielded temporarily. "Go, but do not go too far away, and pray for me." Moses agreed to pray, but warned him with great authority, "Do not lie again." And as the prophet already foresaw, as soon as the plague retreated, the Egyptian tyrant hardened his dark heart once more. He simply would not let Israel go away. Despair began to take hold of the Hebrews once again. "He will never let us go," lamented the enslaved leaders. Moses, with his eyes fixed on the divine promise, declared with a firm voice, "Then the Lord will violently strike what Egypt protects the most." "What is left?" they asked. "Their deep pride," replied the liberator. Immediately, a deadly and devastating plague hit the Egyptian herds. Horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, and sheep suddenly fell completely dead to the ground. Palace officials ran desperately to the throne room. "Majesty, the herds are dying everywhere, but in Goshen, nothing died there." Pharaoh summoned Moses, shouting full of poisonous hatred, "You are destroying my whole kingdom." Moses did not retreat a single millimeter. "I am only announcing it. It is God himself who is doing it." The arrogant monarch crossed his arms. "Tell your God that I will not yield." And the voice of heaven decreed, "He has clearly heard your offense. The Egyptian king mocked the divine warning. How long until I decide to listen? Moses looked deep into the tyrant's eyes and sentenced, "Then listen right now. Tomorrow there will be a terrible hailstorm like Egypt has never seen in all its history. Whoever runs and hides will live, but whoever does not take shelter will fall completely dead." The prophet turned his back and majestically left the hall. The next day, Moses raised his staff, and the great judgment of fire began. Deafening thunder tore through the heavy skies, and giant hailstones began to plummet, mixed with flashes of fire running rapidly across the earth. The empire was lashed without any mercy. Immense trees were broken like mere twigs. The green crops were completely destroyed, and absolute terror took over the palace streets. But in the humble land of Goshen, the skies remained incredibly calm and completely protected by the powerful and loving hand of the Creator of the universe. The palace was in ruins, and Pharaoh, overcome by mortal dread, hurriedly summoned the two prophets in the middle of the violent storm. "He is absolutely destroying everything," cried the terrified counselors. The proud king of Egypt finally bowed. "I have sinned. Pray to the Lord. Enough, I will surely let you go." Moses, knowing the monarch's false heart, agreed. "When I leave the city, I will stretch out my hands, and the terrifying storm of fire and hail will finally stop." As soon as the thunder silenced, the king went back on his fragile promise. As judgment, a colossal and frightening cloud of hungry locusts invaded the empire. The sky darkened with the volume of insects, which cruelly devoured every last green leaf the hail had spared. "There is no more food, Majesty," a desperate guard shouted. Pharaoh called Moses again and proposed that only the adult men go to worship, leaving their families behind. But Moses firmly rejected the offer. The king expelled Moses, violently threatening to cut out his tongue. The prophet retorted with unshakable authority, "Then hold on to your kingdom with force." Desperate, Pharaoh asked for forgiveness one last time so the locusts would disappear. But when the plague retreated, he hardened his evil heart once again. Then the Lord sent dense darkness. A physical and palpable darkness, so thick you couldn't see your own face, covered all of Egypt for 3 days of pure terror. For 3 days, the empire that claimed to control absolutely everything was left without direction and without the courage to take a single step. The darkness was palpable and terrifying. On the other side, in the humble land of Goshen, the light remained on, simple but impossible to ignore. Pharaoh summoned Moses in the dark and yielded a little. "Go serve the Lord. Take all your children, but leave the herds here." Moses, with unshakable firmness, refused the king's demand. "Not a single hoof will be left behind," declared the prophet. "We desperately need them for the sacrifices to our God." The monarch's pride exploded in deadly hatred. "Get out of my presence and never dare look at my face again. On the day you see me, you will certainly die." Moses knew it was no longer a conversation, but the definitive end. He looked into the tyrant's eyes enveloped in darkness and sentenced his fate. "Just as you have spoken, I will never see your face again." Moses gathered the Hebrew leaders for the darkest and most decisive night of all. "Choose a lamb without blemish for each family," he ordered with urgency. "Keep it until the evening and then sacrifice it. Your children must stay indoors, no exceptions." He instructed the people to take the lamb's blood and put it on the doorposts and lintels of their humble homes. "Eat the meat roasted over the fire with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. The Lord will pass completely." The frightened leaders asked the reason for the blood on the doors. Moses revealed the terrible final judgment, "Because tonight death will enter the houses that are not marked with this blood. The judgment is not for you, it is for the great Egypt. But if anyone disobeys this order, there will be absolutely no difference. So, obey." They had to eat hastily, with their belts fastened, sandals on their feet, and staffs in their hands. That dark night would be one of great haste. The Hebrew families locked their doors as the night covered the earth with a heavy mantle of tension. Inside the small clay houses, the lamb was consumed in absolute silence. "Mother, what is that?" asked a frightened child in the heavy atmosphere. "Stay with me. Stay inside the house," the mother replied, hugging her tightly. The deep silence outside was far more terrifying than any storm. Until, in the middle of that dreaded dark dawn, the final judgment began to slowly walk. An invisible and deadly shadow crossed the silent streets of the Egyptian Empire. In the houses without the mark of blood, from the prisoner's humble hut to the king's golden palace, death demanded its terrible price. Suddenly, an agonizing and deafening cry tore through the dawn of ancient Egypt. It was real. The Almighty's judgment had fallen. The monarch's unshakable pride was finally broken into 1,000 pieces as he fully embraced the lifeless body of his own firstborn son. Completely destroyed, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron in the middle of the night of pure terror and pain. "Moses, rise up and get out from among my people immediately," shouted the king, his voice choking with death. "Go serve the Lord as you firmly said. Take your sheep, your cattle, take absolutely everything and just go away. And bless me also." The man who considered himself an untouchable God on earth was now totally prostrated by the true and sovereign God of all Israel. The order of departure sounded like a thunder of hope in Goshen. "We are going," shouted the Hebrew people in unison. "Take absolutely everything you can carry. Do not go back for what was left behind," Moses instructed with urgency. There was not even time for the bread to rise in the kneading bowls. After 430 long years of heavy chains and daily tears, the incalculable multitude of slaves marched victoriously out of Egypt in the dawn of a true liberation. Freedom had a sweet taste, but the empire would never rest without fighting. A few days after the slaves left, the weeping of mourning in Pharaoh's dark heart quickly transformed again into an unbridled and vindictive fury. "What have we completely done?" the tyrant asked his astonished generals. "We let our useful slaves just walk away." The arrogant king of Egypt immediately ordered with bloody and deep fury, "Prepare the chariots of war, the best chariots of all right now." 600 of the best and fastest chariots of Egypt, along with the entire Grand Royal Army, marched raising enormous clouds of dust in the scorching desert. They wanted blood and pure revenge. The multitude of Hebrews, walking guided by God, looked back in fear and saw the dust of death rapidly approaching. Absolute terror invaded the camp. They were completely cornered between the cruel swords of the most lethal army of antiquity and the deep waters of the Great Red Sea. The entire crowd paralyzed in absolute terror before the Red Sea. The ground violently trembled under their tired feet, announcing the relentless arrival of death. The most powerful army of the ancient world advanced at a gallop, thirsty for blood and revenge. Desperate, the Hebrews turned furiously against Moses. "Did you bring us to the desert to die cruelly? We should have stayed as slaves in Egypt. There we had tombs. Here we will all be completely massacred in the desert sand." Moses, even feeling the enormous pressure of over 2 million lives on his shoulders, kept his eyes fixed on the dark skies. He did not bow to the mortal despair of his own people, but raised his voice with an impressive and unshakable divine authority. "Do not have any fear. Stand firm exactly where you are. Just be still. For today you will see the great and wonderful salvation that the Almighty Lord will accomplish. The cruel Egyptians you see today will disappear completely." As the night swallowed the desert, the majestic pillar of fire that guided Israel moved silently, placing itself as an impassable barrier of flames between the frightened Israelites and Pharaoh's furious army. Then Moses cried out deeply to the Lord in the middle of the darkness. God's answer echoed through the night wind with infinite power. Why do you cry out to me? Tell the children of Israel right now to bravely march forward towards the great and magnificent Red Sea waters. God ordered, raise your wooden staff and stretch out your hand over the raging waters of the sea to divide them completely. With unshakable faith and a beating heart, Moses obeyed. He walked to the edge of the dark waters and raised his arm. Suddenly, a supernatural and absurdly strong east wind began to blow with absolute fury. The deep waters of the Grand Red Sea began to brutally tear in half, revealing a dry and safe path right at the very bottom of the impossible ocean. Dark water walls as high as great mountains miraculously rose on both sides, held only by the invisible and glorious hands of the Creator. The amazed multitude began to march hastily through that dry and mysterious corridor. "Walk! Do not stop for anything!" shouted the leaders, deeply amazed and trembling. Men, women, the elderly, children, and their entire herds crossed the completely impossible path during that epic dawn of grand salvation and glorious heavenly deliverance. When the morning began to dawn dramatically, the colossal protective pillar of fire finally dissipated. The arrogant Pharaoh and his merciless war generals saw the completely impossible happening before their very own eyes. The open sea. Blinded by poisonous pride and a deep thirst for blood, they made their greatest and most lethal mistake. Pharaoh whipped his horses, and the entire immense Egyptian army, with its iron chariots, furiously plunged into that mysterious dry path. But the Lord of Hosts, from the top of the sacred cloud, looked furiously at the Egyptian troops and brought total chaos upon them. Suddenly, the heavy wheels of the war chariots began to come off entirely on their own. The majestic horses reared in pure panic, and the brave soldiers slipped with deep fear. "Flee from the Hebrews!" shouted the generals in profound despair. "Their very own God is bravely fighting against the mighty Egypt." But it was already too late to turn back. All the people of Israel had already reached the other shore in total safety. Then the Almighty God ordered, "Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea again so that the waters return with great force." At the golden sunrise, Moses obeyed. With a terrifying roar that made the world tremble, those immense walls of water collapsed violently all at once. The ocean's fury swallowed every single chariot, every horse, and every soldier of the arrogant Egyptian empire without any mercy. The waters finally calmed down, swallowing the screams of hatred, forever erasing the largest and most cruel army the ancient world had ever known. No one survived. The oppressor was dead. On the safe shore across the sea, the warm morning light illuminated the faces of the freed slaves. They breathed deeply, feeling the sweet air of true and eternal freedom. "Thank God, we are saved," they murmured, hugging each other with countless tears of pure relief rolling down their faces. The people exploded in a majestic song of victory that echoed through the deserts. "I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and its fearsome rider he has thrown into the sea." Miriam, with her tambourine in her hands, led the beautiful dance of divine salvation. A young Hebrew looked in sheer amazement at Moses and asked with a trembling voice, "Is it completely over?" Moses, looking thoughtfully at the vast sand ahead, wisely replied, "No, it just began."